This, yeah, okay. So this URL at the bottom here has more of a detailed description in, well, it's on my website, it's in English. I have been giving open space conferences for maybe 5 years now, and the first time I saw one was at the Python conference in the US, and it was very impressive. So the question is, at the last conference you attended, what was the best thing that happened? And many people, when asked this question, will say birds of a feather, or the hallway conversations. I think here in Brazil you call it trading cards. Is that right? Yeah, okay. So what the idea of open spaces is to say, well, if you've traveled all this way, why should you sit there listening to me when you could be talking to each other? And it turns out that you get much more out of that experience. So Open Spaces says, why not have the most interesting conversations you can the entire time you're at the conference? And we discover that that's a much better use of a plane ticket. So these are also, you may have seen things called unconferences, and that is the same thing. I have even gone so far, last March, I think it was, I had what I would call a non-conference where there was no structure at all. People just were mostly in my living room working and talking or doing whatever they wanted. We ended up with most of the Jython team there working on Jython, and a number of other people doing other things or going skiing. Actually, that was very successful too, but that's maybe a little too extreme for most people at this point. So the idea of an open spaces conference is that it is primarily self-organizing. One person can organize as many as 2,000 people without getting overwhelmed, because it's the people who are primarily doing the organizing themselves. And there is generally no pre-planning. You just say, we're going to have an open spaces conference on Python, as we are over here. You just create the time and the space, and there's the way that you do it is you start by, you have some sort of a board, and you make a grid on the board, and you have rooms, and usually you will name the rooms. For example, we have the balcony. We discovered, okay, there's a balcony, and then there's a main room, and maybe there's, you could do it on the terrace here in the middle, so we give it those names, and there are times, and you decide how long the time is. Very often a discussion might be 45 minutes or an hour. And then what you do is you just start with an empty grid, and people say, I would like to have a discussion. And what you do is you either write directly on the grid, as I think we're going to be doing here, or very often it's convenient to use Post-it notes. So here's an example. I would create a Post-it note for alternative languages on the Java virtual machine, and I would put my name on it. And that doesn't mean I'm speaking, it just means I'm the one who came up with the idea. And so if you want to move it or ask me questions about it, and I don't have to be an expert on it either. It can just be something I'm interested in having a discussion about. So, and I put this in a slide, and then and you just go on and do that and fill up the slots. One of the things that may happen is you may discover that there's more than one person talking about, say, a similar subject. So you might have the discussion, two different discussions of closures. And so the idea is that somebody, either Jane or Bob, notices that we're both talking about closures. So instead of taking up 2 rooms, why don't we combine our discussions? And so there's a certain amount of discussion and bartering about this. Another thing that happens is, suppose in this same time slot, I decide to do something on a Scala language in this case, and Jane decides that she says, well, we're doing our closure thing here, and I really want to come to yours. So would it be possible to move it? And this is one of the reasons why Post-it notes are important. So you say, okay, yes, I can move mine, and then we can both go to each other's if we want to. So you fill the spaces up, and then you just go and you have the discussions. So people often wonder about going to open spaces. They're worried because it's a conversation, and you worry, can I contribute something of value, or should I come with a presentation? It's surprising. You will be surprised at what you know that other people will be interested in hearing about. Even though you may think you have nothing of value to contribute, you just typically discover that you do. And it is highly discouraged to have any kind of presentation. Occasionally you will draft people and you will say, well, you're an expert on some aspect of something that I really want to know about, and so could you give us a discussion about this? And maybe you would, in that case, be talking a little bit. But we really we really want to have a conversation and not a lecture. So there are certain sort of rules about open spaces or ideas, and that is whoever shows up is the right group. It doesn't have to be any particular group. It could be 2 people. I've had open space discussions with just 2 people, and that's great too. Whatever happens is it's basically a process of letting go. You don't expect or decide that anything has to happen. And starting and finishing is, if we have a time slot that's maybe 45 minutes, if you finish in 20 minutes, that's fine. Sometimes things go over. Maybe you move them to a different space. That's fine too. So I'm getting the impression that Brazilians should not have any trouble with any of these concepts. It's Saturday, it's sunny, we'll show up late. No big deal. So those are kind of the rules. It's no big deal. So I have a specific, every once in a while you'll get people who like to talk too much and kind of take over and lecture. And so I've written in this URL which is part of this URL that I showed at the beginning, talking about, okay, here's a way to discourage lecturing. Maybe asking, I'd like to hear what other people have to say on this. Just attempting to keep it as a conversation. So that's very important. And probably the most important part of open spaces is referred to as the law of 2 feet. And what this says is that if you're in a discussion that's not interesting you, you should go and find one that is, or go get coffee, or something like that. It's more than just serving you, which it does. If you feel like you can just go to until you find one that really interests you, that's very good for you. But the other thing is the rest of the group. If you're sitting there and you're bored, or you're doing email or something, it draws the energy of the rest of the group down, and it's really not fair to them. So you should go for both reasons. And so it is encouraged to move around, and it is not rude or anything like that. The problem that you will have once you've started experiencing open spaces is that this kind of conference it becomes more and more difficult for you to go to. And what I have found myself doing when I go to a regular conference is I'll listen for a few minutes, and if the speaker isn't interesting to me, I'll get up and move to another one and another one until I find one that's interesting for me, if I'm lucky, or a discussion in the hallway. So that's the idea. So it's not very complicated, and we're going to do it the rest of the day over here. Is that correct? And I think you know where it is. And that's all. Should we take questions, or? Okay, does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, good. Okay, yes, that's right. We'll be over there to answer questions. And remember, I'm not speaking. I'll just be in conversations and moving around and stuff. So it's not, right. It's not me talking or anything. We are all having discussions, and if you want to have them in Portuguese, that's okay. I'll go find one in English.